that you meet. So when you're looking at your parents, it kind of not a big deal to do it. For like if you meet somebody or you go out, you're supposed to look at them in their face and shake their hand and say hi, how are you today? But for other than that, like if you're talking to your parent, sometimes they will say no, don't look at me because I'm talking to you, listen, or vice versa. They'll be like, look at me,
So
listen to
let me
me.
ask you this: what can a nurse expect coming across like a Hispanic when they come into the room and they see all the families there and they're yelling in a completely different language, which obviously Spanish is the predominant language. We do have some Hispanics who are Brazilian. They're considered Hispanic and they actually speak Portuguese, so take
Yep.
that into consideration. Not everyone's Spanish is the same. We've
Yep.
spent time together and we've
Some
noticed
words
there are
are
some words
different.
that are very,
Yep.
very different.
So when you come into that kind of situation, if you have most of the time for my family, whenever my grandparents were in the hospital or any of my family was in the hospital, it was a lot of us in the room. So what we kind of seen is that some nurses will take the family into consideration and like, hi, how are you guys today, and kind of get the feel from them. Because sometimes what they don't want to tell us, the family will tell us. Because I know my grandpa, when they would used to ask him a question, he used to say no, 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 but my mom would jump in and be like, no, dad, that's not what it is. And she would actually tell the truth for him. And vice versa. It was just kind of, you have to take the whole family into consideration because if you're not including the family, let's say they're alone in the room and you're not including the family, you're telling him he's not allowed to have any salt for hypertension or anything like that. But he likes his tortillas. He's not going to tell his wife, they told me not to have salt. So you just have to kind of keep everybody in mind so that we can help them the best to the abilities that we
So
can.
yeah, the Hispanic community, it's a very like close knit community, and family is very important. It's a very integral part of, especially for the healthcare.
Yep.
So going with that, who then would be like the decision maker?
Well, it all depends. Most of the time, if they're married, it would be the husband or wife. And if that's not the case, then one of the children, whoever's there at the time, is whoever is making the decisions. I know back and forth, like I said, my grandpa was in the hospital for a good time. My mom, it just depended. It was my mom or my aunt or my uncle. So whoever was there at the time, whatever needed to be done that day would be done based off our decisions. Or most of the time, it was my grandma. Because my grandma was the one taking him to dialysis and everything. So if he couldn't sign, then she would be the one signing. It really just depends on who's there with them at the time. If he can do it on his own or she can do it on his own, they will do it. But they kind of take into consideration what somebody else says. Especially my mom, since my grandpa understood English kind of, but he wasn't like perfect at it. So the doctor would talk to him and everything, and my grandpa would kind of like, okay, and then turn around and look at my mom and say, am I understanding correct? And kind of had my mom explain it to him to make sure that it was exactly what they were talking about.
So let me ask you this: is it, more so like your mother or father? Is it more so like a female figure or male figure usually takes that responsibility, takes that role of making medical decisions? Say if like kids came into play.
For when kids come into play, most of the time when I've seen it, it's mom bringing the kids to the hospital. Obviously, there is cases where mom's not in the picture,
Right.
so the dad has to make the choices. But most of the time, it's mom. My mom used to take me to the doctor and
same.
everything, so that's who was signing and giving consent for everything. So really look at mom, ask mom. Mom, 9 times out of 10, mom's gonna tell you more than dad can. Because I've seen some dads where dads have to call mom and say, what medication are they taking, or stuff like that. It's just depends. It's mostly the women though.
It is. I would have to agree with that too. A lot of the medical decisions that are made in my family is usually made by my mother, believe it or not. Everyone calls her, be it my brother who's married or my cousin, my uncle. It's always my mother who they consolidate and they seek guidance with.
Yeah, my mom too.
Yeah. So are palliative care and hospice care being valued in the Hispanic culture?
Well, I think they are because personally speaking, my grandpa was in hospice towards the end of his renal failure, so he was there. We took advantage of that because obviously my grandma was so used to always taking care of him, but as he got worse, she kind of had health issues, so she couldn't manage herself and my grandpa at the same time. So we had him at a nursing home until he needed to go to hospice care. So palliative care is very important because one, when he was at that nursing home, that palliative care was coming into play. They were always telling us, okay, your dad or your grandpa's doing this, we're helping them do that. Maybe they take him out one day, or we used to go to visit him all the time. So keeping that family connection with him was very important to us. In the hospice care as well, it was an open door policy for us there. Honestly, but obviously not at night, but during the day we were there, and he knew we were there because he could feel us, and he couldn't talk to us, but he knew, because when we would grab his hand, he kind of like squeeze and give us like cues that he knows we're there. So to see like the nurses there, even though he was in that terminally ill stage, they were still constantly checking on him to make sure that there was anything that they could do to make it as comfortable as possible for him.
Yeah, my grandfather's actually in hospice right now, and it's been a really big strain for my mother, who was previously taking care of him. It was very difficult because usually with, I guess, the Hispanic population,
they're so used to taking care of them.
We take care of our own, you know, and then it gets to like where, we wait usually till it gets so bad that we just can't anymore. So when hospice comes in, palliative care, you know, it really lifts a tremendous weight off of our shoulders. So it really definitely helps.
Yeah, and then that's not, like I said, it's not for all Hispanic cultures, because some Hispanics I know, they refuse to go to a nursing home. They will tell their children, I don't want to do a nursing home. And if they know what a hospice care is, they say, I don't want that either. I want to live in my house up until I die. I want to stay in my house until my last day. And it's just up to the family to decide whether they can fulfill that or whether they can't. So most of the time, I know in Mexico and stuff, when they do pass away, they rarely do they pass away in the hospitals or like in a hospice. They pretty much pass away at home. They're at home and then they pass away while asleep or maybe on the couch. So it just all depends on what it is. But in Mexico, you don't really see like a hospice or a nursing home. It's very rare.
So really, just to wrap it all up, I know we did cover this a bit, but just bullet point really quick for us, how can we become more culturally competent and so that we can provide patient-centered care?
Obviously, we got to establish that communication with the patient, because if there's no communication, nothing will be done. So if we can get that communication started by either getting a translator or having some kind of person who can help us communicate with them, you also got to make sure that you yourself are open-minded to a different culture, because if you yourself are not used to this culture and you refuse to learn about it or do like an expansion on it, you won't be able to effectively treat this patient. Like the patient, let's say I am not of Mexican descent and I go to treat a Mexican heritage person or anything like that. If I don't know about it, I can't listen or say, hey, have you done this? Have you taken maybe some herbal remedies? Have you taken a tea instead of taking your medication? I won't know this. So you kind of have to learn to open your horizons and talk to them and be able to adapt to their culture. And if you don't know, maybe ask somebody around you who does know about the culture. Maybe if you're in a community like Belle, Glade, or here at one of the hospitals, you kind of tend to learn and adapt to it, because a lot of people learn quick. Because they when they all come in, they're all around the same kind of culture. It's like a Mexican Hispanic culture, a Cuban Hispanic culture, a Haitian culture, or a Jamaican culture, something like Islander and stuff like that. It's really predominantly around here.
Yeah, and even though we are a Hispanic culture, remember, we do have subcultures within that culture. So not every Hispanic is the same. Not everything is going to be linear, and you know, you're not going to see the same cues in everyone. Everyone is different, so that is something to take into consideration. Closing it, you know, make sure that you do some research, go through some experiences, like I said, immerse yourself into the culture, and acceptance of that culture is very important, to not have any biases. So Leslie, this is our closure. This pretty much wraps it up. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Diaz, and thank you everyone else for having us.